Alrighty guys, today I want to talk a little bit about the rumours that are circulating around the potential changes for 10th edition Warhammer 40k. Arcs of Omen is clearly the last season of 9th edition, and then we're likely to be heading into 10th edition midway through the year. And there's a lot of rumours going around talking about the big changes, similar to how when we went from 7th edition to 8th edition, how they pretty much flipped the whole game on its head. They indexed everything, they made all of the previous codexes redundant, and they started afresh. Apparently that's happening again, as the rumours would have you believe. And also one of the big things that they're doing is they're reducing the complexity of the game significantly. So what I want to talk about in today's episode are these changes, what they could potentially mean for competitive 40k, and some of the challenges that might arise if we have a game with reduced complexity. So with that being said, we're going to jump straight into the video. But before we do, I just wanted to point out that we are having a free giveaway of an Angron model on our Patreon this month. So all you have to do is sign up, $4 a month, which is only $1 a week. That'll gain you access to the Patreon, which has got a whole ton of benefits, and including this month giving away a free 3D printed Angron, which will be in your hands before the World Eaters Codex even hits the shelves, which means you'll have time to build and paint it before you get your hands on the Codex, which means that when you do, you'll be ready to hit the tabletops with Angron from day one. So if you want more information about how you can enter this competition, head over to the Patreon, and I look forward to seeing you there, and let's get into today's video.
Welcome to the Black God.
G'day guys, today I want to talk about some potential rumours that have been circling around 10th edition for Warhammer 40k, what this could potentially mean, and a little bit of a broader concept on complexity in games like Warhammer 40k and why it's so important. So basically the rumour that I'm addressing here is one that basically says that when 10th edition comes around, it's going to be similar to the changes from 7th edition to 8th edition, where they basically indexed everything, removed all the rules, and did a hard reset. Every unit got a new data sheet, every codex was invalidated, and they basically changed the core rules in a dramatic and massive way, which resulted in a completely new game emerging, right? Kept some of the core principles like having phases and, shooting and blah blah blah, but essentially it was a completely new game. Now apparently the rumors are that they're doing that again, and part of the reason that they're doing that is because the feedback that they have been receiving from players is that the game is just too complex. There's too much complexity, there's too many different rule interactions, there's too much in the way of, bloat in the rules and the codexes, etc. Which I can 100% empathize with that position. This game is immensely complex. But what I want to talk about is why I think that that's actually good, and it's one of the things that makes 40k playable at all. Now, I think part of the problem is with the way people approach this challenge is they want everything to be really, really simple, right? But they also want everything to have a lot of flavor. And it's really hard to achieve both of those things, right? So what I think GW has done, and whether they've done this by design or whether it's just an accident, is irrelevant. But what they've done is very, very smart, and that is that they've just blown the doors open and added a ridiculous amount of complexity to the game in the way that there's a billion different versions of more or less the same rule. There's a billion different, stratagems and warlord traits and relics and aura abilities and buffs and, upgrades for characters and all of this sort of stuff that all interact with each other, creating a really, really robust and really, really complex ecosystem of essentially rules interactions. And what I think that does is that makes it way more difficult and thus way more rewarding when you come up with a combination of those abilities that's really, really powerful. Whereas if they remove all that complexity from the game, or even if they dial it way back, what essentially happens is it becomes way more obvious what the powerful things are, and therefore way less satisfying to discover these combinations, right? And that sucks a lot of the enjoyment out of the game. And it also sucks a lot of the skill out of the game, because you just, it's like chess, for example. There's no list writing component to chess, right? So there's literally no satisfaction in that part, And then like rock, paper, scissors, for example, there's a little bit of decision making in that. But there's no real satisfaction. Whereas when you go into 40k and it's like, okay, it's like playing rock, paper, scissors, but there's, fucking 100 different types of choice, each one combos with another type of choice in an interesting and complex way, which is really, really rewarding. And I think most people would agree that writing lists is very fun, looking at all of the different options you have available to you, and then writing one that you think is going to be fun to play. That's one of the most satisfying parts of the game. And often people will spend more time doing that than they will actually playing the game itself. I 100% do that. Like, I pretty much exclusively play at tournaments these days. I play the odd practice game at home, but more or less it's all at tournaments. And if I'm preparing for a tournament that's going to have 5 3-hour rounds, that's 15 hours. But I will spend like an hour a day fucking like for 6 weeks leading up to the event, practicing ideas, toying with different ideas, researching rules, writing this list, coming up with all of the different, elements of the list, and then refining that list over time. Like, that is for me, that is the satisfying and that is the constructive part of the game. And then the actual game that you play is just a way of testing that theory. You've spent ages researching a theory and then you put it to the test on the tabletop. But the researching the theory is the fun part, And I'm just concerned that if they remove a lot of the complexity from the game in order to make it more streamlined and more palatable for beginners, and for more, less experienced players or whatever, if they remove a lot of that sort of stuff, they're actually just going to kill the game. Like, it needs to have that complexity. And in order for it to even feel right, it has to have that. Because if you're going to have things like a guardsman and then a scout, or, you got a guardsman, then you got a sisters of battle, then you've got a scout, then you've got a Votan, then you've got a marine, and then you've got a demon. Like, in order to actually have all of these things feel different and unique on the tabletop, you actually need that level of complexity. So I don't know how they're gonna, how they could really dial back that complexity without ruining the game, in my opinion. And also, people complain about net lists and about OP combos and those sorts of things. But I think that one of the things that they are missing is that if you remove complexity from the game, that's going to get way worse. Because the beautiful thing about a really complex ecosystem is, as soon as something rises to the top of that meta, there are so many options available that it's almost inevitable that one of them will be a really strong counter to it, And as a result, the top tier players they'll find that new meta and they'll trailblaze and they'll go, cool, we've discovered this really powerful combo. They take it to events. Then, as that information is disseminated throughout the community then start running that list. And as a result, the top tier players need to pivot into the thing that counters that list in order to remain at the top. So you get this really healthy cycle. But you need, in order for that cycle to exist and for that cycle to work, you actually need massive amounts of diversity in the game and complexity in the game. It needs to be difficult to do, and there needs to be lots of options to choose from, so that it's not just, this person brought rock last event, so I'm just going to make sure that I bring paper to the next one and then I just beat him. It's like, well, no, there needs to be so many different options that it's a skill to even figure out what beats rock. You need to be able to have the skill to determine these things. And now, people are probably thinking, okay, well, that's all well and good for the top tier competitive players, but for those players who just want to play casual games, this complexity is sort of a barrier against entry, it stops people from being able to play. And I completely disagree with that, because if you just go into a Games Workshop store, I don't know when the last time you went into one was, but if you go in there and you've never played 40k before, and you say to the store owner, look, I'm interested. I'm thinking about buying a couple of starter sets, but I've never played before. Can we just play a quick game and you just sort of show me how it works? It's really fucking easy. Like, this game is really fucking easy if you just go, cool, here's a data sheet, these are your models, here's a data sheet for my models, and here's 2 pages or 3 pages of core rules, right? That's really, really easy to play. You know, so as a pickup game that like kids could play, teenagers could play, or whatever, or people who've never heard of 40k before, they could play, it's really fucking easy. It only gets complex and it only gets difficult when you start layering in the match play rules. You start layering in all the complexity of stratagems and the codex and the detachments and the missions and the, you know, all of these things. That's when it starts getting complex. But that's when you want it to start getting complex, because that's designed for the tournament scene. You know, and the tournament scene, as far as I'm concerned, the whole point of having a tournament, the whole reason that we do this, is to give people an opportunity to play the game for starters and enjoy the game that they like. But primarily, the idea of structuring it as a tournament, as opposed to just having it as like a games day, the reason we structure it as a tournament is because we want to identify and then reward players with a diverse set of skills that they're able to use to operate within the bounds of the tournament to demonstrate that they are the strongest and the best player, right? And those skills include things like being able to navigate a complex game. That is a skill that we want rewarded. You know, if you remove the complexity from the game, you're actually removing the ability to identify somebody who has the skills that allow them to navigate that complex game. So the complexity is fucking key to making tournaments worth attending, to making them worth even playing. You know, whereas if they remove the complexity and it becomes a bit more, you know, streamlined, then it becomes it potentially comes a lot less, you know, rewarding to win a tournament, and a lot less meaningful. Because, you know, if like, and people will probably be pushing back and going, okay, well, chess has almost zero complexity, right? It's just, you know, everyone has the same pieces, it's perfectly balanced, blah, 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 right? Yet it's still obviously very, very rewarding to win chess because of the strategy that you can employ. And that's absolutely true. But 40k and chess are not the same game. And trying to reduce chess at 40k down to chess doesn't work because of the way the game is formatted. You know, unless you flip it on its head and be like, it's literally like chess where you move one piece at a time, you take turns moving pieces, and each one of those pieces has a set number of, you know, like if you do it that way and literally make it into chess, that works. But when you involve rolling dice, you involve, you know, my whole army takes its turn, then your whole army takes its turn, and then you involve all of these things, you actually just can't remove the rest of that complexity. It's actually required in order for that system to work. So yeah, I'm concerned about these rumors that they're indexing it and, you know, removing a lot of the complexity. It all depends. Like, we don't have any concrete rumors or anything like this by what they mean by removing complexity. There's a lot of talk about how they're removing all the stratagems, and each codex is only going to have like 2 or 3 stratagems as opposed to having like 2 pages worth. You know, there's a lot of talk about potentially having universal special rules return, which I kind of like. And that's where, in the core rulebook, there'll be an ability called Deep Strike, and then it'll say units with this keyword can be set up in strategic reserves, and at the, you know, reserves step of the movement phase can be set up anywhere on the table, provided it's not within 9 inches of enemy units, right? And then on each unit's data sheet, instead of having that rule written out, it'll just have the keyword Deep Strike. And then you just go, cool, this unit can Deep Strike. The challenge with that is, it removes the potential for complexity. So for example, you know, the demons have their Deep Strike, but it's different, slightly different. The Genestealer Cult have a Deep Strike that's slightly different. You know, being able to have different versions of the same rule means that you get rewarded as a player if you do the research and you learn all the factions and you learn what their abilities are and you learn what they can do. Then you get rewarded if you're able to then make decisions intelligently based on that information that you've learned through your research, you know? Like, adding in basically the harder they make this game to do, the more rewarding it is to win. And they can always still have that lower tier of game where it is dialed back and it is really basic, but it uses power level and it just uses the data sheets and whatever. They can do that and it's still fine. Just have two separate systems, one for the competitive stuff, which is exactly like the current system, and then another one that's the simplified version, which is for your casual game, your crusade battles and that sort of stuff. I think that's perfectly fine, and I think a lot of the people that are complaining about the complexity in the game, they're kind of doing themselves a disservice, because if they remove the complexity from the game, well, then they're kind of killing the spirit of 40k, and I think that's something that's completely appreciated, is how the spirit of this game is one of complexity. It has always been one of complexity. This 40k has never been a simple game, and I for one don't want it to ever become a simple game. I don't want to, I take a lot of pride in the fact that I am a relatively highly ranked competitive Warhammer 40k player, because it's complex and because it's difficult to do, the fact that I'm able to do it at a high level is very rewarding. Nobody's proud of being, a really good, whatever, pick a thing that's really easy to do, if it's really, really easy to do, then there's no pride in being able to do it, Whereas being able to do something that's hard, well, that tells you something about that person, That tells you that that person puts in the work. That tells you that that person has a baseline, of understanding of the way that these sorts of systems work, So yeah, I just wanted to sort of share my thoughts on this rumor that they're basically removing a lot of the complexity and dialing it back, and just hopefully share a bit of a warning. And it obviously would be too late at this stage, and I'm not suggesting that my words would have any impact on Games Workshop's decision-making process. But just so sort of a careful what you wish for, I guess, to the broader community, is that, if you want something that's really simple, be careful, because first of all, there is already a very simple version of 40k, and nobody plays it because it's shit, nobody plays a game where it's cool, we're not playing match play, so there's no detachments or anything like that, and therefore there's no command points, so you get no stratagems, and we're just going to play with just the data sheets. There's a reason nobody plays that game, because it's shit, You want the stratagems, you want to have to build detachments, you want to have to spend points on things, not power level, You want to build balanced, interesting, diverse armies with complex interactions that are exciting and fun. That's what you want in 40k, and if they remove that complexity, they're gonna kill that. I will admit that I would be totally fine with a little bit of a dialing back on some of the complexity. Some of the rules, for example, the fights first, fights last mechanic, that's dog shit. That needs to go back to initiative values like it was in every previous edition. So things like that, I'm totally okay with. Not necessarily removing complexity, but we're just cleaning it up, making it a little bit easier to navigate and a little less confusing with the way that they do things. I think one of the greatest innovations of 8th and 9th edition was the keywords thing. Keywords is a brilliant system, and I think that they could expand on that and have your faction keywords, your general keywords, profile keywords maybe, and then have ability keywords, and just have all of that broken down, and then just have a glossary in the main rulebook that has every keyword and what it means. There's things they could do like that, which doesn't necessarily remove the complexity. It just cleans up the way that complexity is presented and makes it a little bit easier for newer players to just go, oh yeah, cool, this is what I can do. And when somebody says, oh, my unit has a feel no pain save, you know what that means. Whereas like at the moment we have all of these different abilities, and some of them only trigger against mortal wounds, some of them only trigger against, you know, multi-damage stuff, some of them only trigger if something below a certain strength. There's all these, you know, different damage reduction things. Like, cleaning all of that up so that it's a little bit more uniformed, but maintaining the complexity of units and the complexity of data sheets, I think is absolutely critical. And I hope these rumors are wrong, and I'm okay with them doing another index. I think that's fine. And starting a clean slate, because the good thing about that is then everybody sort of starts on somewhat equal footing, and, you know, we can go from there. So I'm okay with that. And I also understand and appreciate that GW need to do something, because 9th edition is basically closing up now. They've had some of the best success in terms of tournament win rates and percentages they've ever had, which means they've had some of the best balance that they've ever had. But they, you know, like they need to do something, because they can't just keep going with this. Part of their business model is that they need to do a new edition every couple of years to reset everything, to reinvigorate the player base, and get everybody buying new models and new books and all that sort of stuff. So I understand that. That's cool. I'm okay with that. I just hope they don't, you know, I hope they don't make a Sisters of Battle and a Guardsman have the same profile. And I hope they don't make a Sister Battle and a Marine have the same profile. Like, they need to keep all of these different values, keep them all variable. I hope they don't make a Bolter, you know, and a fucking, you know, a Orc Shooter the same, you know, profile. I like the fact that they've introduced AP. This is one of the reasons why I actually personally, I really liked Armor of Contempt, because what that did is that meant that an Eldar with a 3+ save and a Marine with a 3+ save were different, you know. So it was like, you know, a Marine with a 3+ save wasn't quite as good as an Eldar with a 2+ save, but he was better than an Eldar with a 3+ save. So he sat sort of in between those two values, you know. And then I think that was very smart, and that what that did is that added complexity. But unfortunately, people, you know, couldn't get on board with that by the sounds of it, because the fact that they've removed it across the board, even though they were getting pretty decent balance results, tells me that they've done that due to complaints by players. You know, players were complaining it's too difficult. I've got to work out, well, I reduce your AP by 1 because of my Armor of Contempt, and then you have AP, and then I have a save, and then I'm in cover, so I've got this, but then you've got, like, it's like, it does get quite complex to calculate. So I think people have complained it's too hard, but the problem is that Armor of Contempt literally was in a balanced data slate for competitive play. Little Timmy at his game store, he didn't need to worry about that. You know, he could just play the more casual, laid back, relaxed game. That rule was implemented exclusively for tournaments. That's what it was there for. And as a result, like, there's an expectation, in my opinion, that tournament players are able to keep up with the complexity. You need to be able to keep up with the complexity, because it's a complex game and it's a rewarding game. That's what makes it rewarding. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up this rant here. I would love to hear what you guys think about this. What are your predictions for 10th edition? Do you think they are going to remove complexity? Do you think they are going to dial everything back? And if they do you think that's a good idea? Or do you share my opinion that this is heading in a very bad direction with a frightening pace? So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. We always have really good chats there. Also, make sure you pick up a shirt from my Teespring account. Every time you buy a shirt there, a little bit of that money goes towards me, and that allows me to buy better cameras, you know, upgrade my equipment. And I'm also looking to potentially, if I can get enough support through the various means, I would like to reduce my workload and go back to working a few days a week instead of, you know, I currently work 45 hours a week in a warehouse, which makes releasing content regularly for you guys very difficult. So if I can get, you know, a bit more support on the Patreon, etc., then I'll be able to actually reduce my workload, which will allow me to increase the quality and frequency of the content here on this channel. So thank you to everybody who does already show their support in these various ways. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Cheers.
the Blood God.
The Warhammer community suffers from some of the most prohibitively expensive essentials in the world, especially Australian content creators. Every single day, Dean wants to create content, but he can't. Suffering from old, worn-out brushes, expensive model kits, and costly software and equipment he can't endure much longer. Just look at this dirty paint water. Would you drink this? Would you let your child? Even a small monthly donation can help provide Dean with clean paint water, basic tools for survival, and access to life-saving information and education. So please, follow the links in the description below and find out how you can sponsor a mad cunt like Dean today and end the suffering. Suffering that is cruel, unsustainable, and your fault.
Do your objective markers ever get lost behind terrain or other models and become difficult to see? Do they ever get bumped and accidentally moved during a game? And do they ever spark arguments about distances? Well, not anymore. Introducing the blog for the Blood God, not even remotely patented neoprene objective markers. Made from the same material as astronaut suits, or maybe military equipment, or probably neither of those things, this 2mm thick neoprene synthetic rubber is tear resistant, water resistant, and is designed to last. But that's not all. The blog for the Blood God, not even remotely patented neoprene objective markers come in a variety of different designs and styles to suit any faction represented in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. These objective markers are a perfect gift for yourself or a friend, and are a perfect way to flex and show your opponent that not only are you a smarter, cooler, and better 40k player than them, but you also have more disposable income than they do. For the low price of $25, you'll get not one, not two, but 6 neoprene objective markers, perfectly designed for 9th edition Warhammer 40k. But wait, there's more. For a limited time only, people who sign up on Patreon to support Blog for the Blood God as a Skull Champion tier $5 per month member will gain access to a custom design service where I will design a unique logo to support their gaming club, like the one I did to the left here for the Potato Farmers local gaming club here in Melbourne. Follow the links in the description of this video to pick up your set today.